Hey, brand builder, Rory Vaden here. Thank you so much for taking the time to check out this interview. As always, it's our honor to provide it to you for free. And wanted to let you know there's no big sales pitch or anything coming at the end. However, if you are someone who is looking to build and monetize your personal brand, we would love to talk to you and get to know you a little bit and hear about some of your dreams and visions and share with you a little bit about what we're up to see if we might be a fit. So if you're interested in a free strategy call with someone from our team, we would love to hear from you. You can do that at brandbuildersgroup.com/podcall, brandbuildersgroup.com/podcall. We hope to talk to you soon. So I am over the top excited to introduce to you someone who I legitimately consider to be one of the smartest people on the planet. In fact, if I were running a very large corporation, or if I had a good friend that was like a Fortune 500 executive and they were looking for consulting, advice, leadership, I would refer them to Peter Sheahan. He is, by the time he was 30 years old, he built not one, but two multi-million-dollar companies. He has spoken more than 2,500 times in 40 plus countries around the globe. And I believe I think only him and I are two people that joined the Professional Speakers Hall of Fame in our 30s. And so he's a Hall of Fame speaker. His client list is, it's crazy. Apple, Chick-fil-A, AT&T. And he's just absolutely brilliant. I've known him from the speakers world for a while. And the real story here is, if you're a Brand Builders Group member, like one of our clients, or if you've ever heard me on someone else's podcast, you know that we teach this framework called Sheahan's Wall. And it is named after Peter Sheahan. Now, he didn't name it after himself. We named it after him. I saw him speak one time randomly on this. He drew this diagram, and then we lost touch. And we just recently reconnected, and he told me, he's like, mate, I wrote a book on the topic of this diagram, which we call Sheahan's Wall. The book is called Making It Happen. It's all about turning good ideas into great results. And so I was like, dude, you got to come on the podcast. Like, you're a celebrity. Our people are going to go nuts. So anyways, with all that, welcome to the show, Peter.
Thanks, Rory. You want to know my side of that story, by the way?
Tell me.
I got like 3 random texts one day, all in probably in the space of a week, actually, going, hey, I heard this, Rory Vaden guy get interviewed on this podcast. He was talking about you and Sheahan's Wall. And I'm like, what do you mean Sheahan's Wall? I'd never heard of this thing. And I'm like, I'm just gonna have to call Rory and find out what the heck's going on. And so, I often make this joke that I'm more famous for being in other people's work than I am for my own work. And so, proud to be associated with your brand, mate.
Well, dude, I thank you for that. And it's been awesome to have this book, and I want to talk to you about the original concepts of it. And going through the book, I realized there was something about the way that you presented it to me where I feel like I heard it a little bit different than what you've been taught, the way you teach it in the actual book. And so I was like, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Now, so can you describe what, so for the people who don't know what we're talking about, if they've never heard me or seen Sheahan's Wall, or if they've never read your book, can you explain what the diagram is, what it represents? Like, how did you put it together originally?
Yeah, look, here's the biggest challenge. Most people who are trying to get a business moving and off the ground are struggling to get the attention of the audience they most need to influence. Now, in my world, that's a very small group of people who run very large companies. In your world, it's thought leaders and people with a message who are looking to build out their personal brand, insert audience here. But none of those people wake up on any given day trying to necessarily go looking for you, or trying to necessarily, bring attention to your value proposition, your offer, your services. You're literally trying to interrupt them or get on their radar. And you and about 4 million other people on any given day, right? And so the underlying concept of the model that underpin that book is that you are better off being very, very tight and targeted in what you do and the value proposition you're bringing forward to that market to grab their attention before you try and sell them everything you could possibly do, right? So, think about when you and I got started in our businesses, Rory, there were probably 15 things we thought we could do for our clients, maybe 15 things we thought we could do for our members. But trying to sell them all 15 on the first date is not a great idea, right? You're better off picking the one that's most likely to grab their attention and get super, super targeted on that one thing. And the more targeted you get, the better chance you've got of piercing what I would call the mental barrier or the attention barrier. Once you've done a piece of work,
which
for
is
someone,
now formerly what she is named as Sheahan's
is
wall.
okay, so you get through Sheahan's wall. So I struggle to use my name in the third person, if that's all right with you, right? So we get through the proverbial Sheahan wall. But once you have that trust, there's almost no limit to what they might allow you to do and the services you might bring, right? And so in my case, I might do a speech and do a really good job of that at a corporate retreat or an executive offsite. And then the CEO will say to me, hey, we really need help around the topic you talked about. Then I can get into a conversation about selling them consulting. And I mean, I've literally turned single speeches into, $50, $60 million worth of revenue opportunities over 10 years, right? That all started with one speech. But if I had gone in and just tried to sell the $50 million opportunity, I wouldn't have even got the meeting, let alone the opportunity, right? And so the point being, here's a simple metaphor. Let's say you meet your life partner, the person you want to make your life partner at a bar. You don't go up to him or her and ask them to marry you in that first interaction. You go up and say, hey, do you mind if I buy you a drink or something, something small and easy to say yes to. That's the real underlying premise. There are other pieces to the model, this idea that mental energy is as scarce a currency as time, and we can get into some of those as well. But the core idea is that no one got out of bed this morning thinking about you. You're trying to get on their mental menu. In order to do that, you're better off being tight, not broad. And then once you have the relationship, expand from there.
So, yeah, I mean, that's so good. And the visual, for those of you that, are you trying to picture this, it's sort of like, I guess, a triangle. I mean, we kind of think of it as like, it starts broad and then you go narrow, and then that's how you break through the wall versus
Correct.
bouncing off the wall, is being narrow. And then as you're narrow, you break through the wall. And then once you're on the other side of that wall, then you can expand. So to zero in on the concept a little bit here, what is the wall? Is it mental? Is it attention? Is that what the wall is? Is that what is representative of the line that separates?
I'd primarily say it's attention, and attention can get expressed in time. Attention could get expressed in my level of engagement. Attention could be expressed in the level of research I might be prepared to do about you before I meet you. Anything where I'm going to invest something I have as a currency into understanding you and what you want to do. That's what's on the other side, meaning like once you have my attention, I will express it in any of those currencies, right? And here's the deal. Like before this podcast, Rory, I had 8 back-to-back calls. I mean, 1 hour after another, after another. I didn't have time to be pitched a new idea. I'm not going to read spam on any given day. And I sure as heck, I'm not going to sort of listen to someone that says, hey, I can do any one of 4,500 things for you. Which of the 4,500 would you like? But if you're targeting me on the right day with the right problem and a very clear value proposition, I might actually give you the time of day. I might say, you know what? I really am struggling with that. Let's take 15 minutes. And now you're on the other side of my wall, right? You are on the other side of my, you've broken through the attention barrier. Yeah. And what you do with those 5 or 6 minutes is up to you. And I know, Roy, you teach a lot of your members how to position themselves, understand their brand, what the bits about them that are unique. I know you talk to a lot about how do you converse and engage in a way that's influential. They're all super important skills once you're through the wall. The bit that comes before that, which I know you also teach around positioning, is, don't be kind of so abstract and broad that no one really knows what you do or the value you're going to bring, or you never get my attention.
And I do want to talk about that, because I do feel like that's obviously the core of this. And it's amazing to me. I heard you speak. It was at an NSA event that I had heard you speak, and it was so powerful that it stuck with me. And you were drawing it. You probably remember, on like a little digital pad, and it was just, it was like a line with 2 triangles, and I was like, that is so powerful. Is it is trust what is on the other side of the wall? You mentioned that word trust earlier, and like in this microcosm of an example, you go, okay, if you get my attention, you're on the other side of the wall, and you might have like 5 minutes or 15 minutes, which represents
Yeah.
kind of how that triangle builds on the other side. It starts, you're kind of there, but you still only have a little bit of time. Would you think of that side as in general as sort of like trust?
I would say trust builds as you move. So let's assume this is a left to right model and the wall's in the middle. As you move to the right of the model, you're at a higher and higher level of trust because you've likely done more and more things together. And if you've done them well, you've created more and more value over time. But when you're just through the wall, it's not about trust, it's about opportunity. You have got, for the first time, an opportunity to hook that person's interest, to get them interested in what you might want to do next. It could be to attend an event, it could be to join a membership, it could be to do corporate consulting, like it depends on what you sell. It might be to try your restaurant out. And so, no, I would say immediately on the other side of the wall is just an opportunity. And it's probably a very fleeting and short opportunity. So you better know how to position your value in that moment. You better make that interaction memorable. It better be incredibly clear what you're going to do for that person, that buyer, or else you're never going to get to a place of trust. So trust is further out, in my opinion, in terms of on the right side of that wall.
Gotcha. Okay. And I think, one of the things that is like the way that you kind of describe it here is in a singular instance, sort of like a singular encounter with an individual person. We've always thought it, we've thought about it as more general, like nobody knows who you are. And then breaking through the wall is like, you reach this point of like critical mass where it's like,
Correct.
okay, now you have enough credibility. So what I hear you saying is it's like it applies in both the granular and at the high level.
The
I
way
think
you're describing it, Rory, is spot on. Like I could do my whole career. I could literally map my career on that model, right? Like I started going into high schools and doing these speeches to kids on how to transition from school to work. I originally hit a brick wall where there was no one was willing to give me a chance. No one was going to give me an opportunity. And then I heard about these things called school to work funding, where public schools were given X dollars a year to teach their kids about alternative career paths. And so I massively narrowed the offer of what I was trying to bring into schools to target school to work. I used all the buzzwords and all the language that were in the funding applications schools needed to be allowed to spend the money on this. And then I'd start calling a careers advisor. And instead of saying, hey, do you want motivational speaker in your school? I'd say, I have 5 specific offerings that match the school to work curriculum and framework. And here is what they look like. We'll do it during a career period. We'll do it for year 10. And so it's like so tight what the offer is. Now that's a single interaction, right? But after 6 months, it got like 6 of those. After another 6 months, I had 180. I did 485 speeches in schools in my second year as a public speaker, right? And so now all of a sudden, I could go back to those same buyers and go, hey, I know I was doing this school to work stuff, but I have this whole motivational thing as well. I have these like what we would call HSC in Australia, you might call the SATs here, SAT prep work. And, I would start having kids join an ongoing course. And all of a sudden I'm doing all these other things that I wasn't able to do before I had credibility and a track record. Now I could do the same model if I step out again, which is so I wrote 3 books for that market. And then I was writing a book on what we would call the millennials, or Generation Y was the frame I used back in the day. And I went to my publisher, and my publisher was like, well, that's a small market. And I think you should write it on all 4 generations because there'll be a much bigger addressable market there. And I'm like, but I don't know anything about baby boomers or the silent generation or Gen X. I know these younger people, Gen Y, these millennials. Let me get really targeted. And so I did the exact same process again, got really tight in my value proposition. And and by the way, stayed true to my actual expertise, right? Like I was talking about something I truly knew. Now, you fast forward 5 years and I wasn't doing a single speech on Gen Y and millennials. I was doing speeches on disruption and the impact that had on business models and corporate culture, because what the whole millennial thing was about was not about young people. It was about the fact that there's a whole new way of interacting with brands, of understanding business, and from paid media to earned media, from you tell me what your product's about to actually I own your brand through the way I interact with it. Like all that was what the millennial change represented, but I couldn't go after that market. I was 25, 26 years old, you know? So I wrote a book about a really targeted thing. It was a very good book. It sold phenomenally around the world. And with that opportunity, I built
About disruption.
No, the book was essentially the Gen Y book, the millennial book.
Oh, you're talking about, oh, you're still, okay.
Yeah, I'm
back on
still
Gen
in the
Y.
same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And what I was able to do though was build multiple companies off the back of that one piece of work, you know? And so, yes, it's an instance, but I actually think I could define my whole career actually using that same model.
So what's fascinating about that is the way I hear you describing it now is not how I've actually ever thought about it. Like, there's an expression, you probably heard this, we use this in the US, get your foot in the door.
Yeah.
What as I hear you describing that now, like with a company or in an industry, it's almost like, hey, I'm using this to kind of get a foot in the door, which is interesting because visually it looks like a wedge, almost like you would like kind of wedge into something. And then once you're in, then it's like, okay, now more opens up inside of that company or inside of that industry to do other ancillary work.
Or Rory, inside of the entire marketplace, because your reputation is established.
Yeah, and that's how I always processed it, was more like your overall reputation is no one knows who you are to now everybody knows who you are and they want you, and so your fee goes up.
And the number of things that you can sell goes up as well.
Yes. Totally. So I get,
we're just talking about it at multiple levels. It's the same metaphor and the same model for a one-on-one interaction. It's the same model for a client relationship as it is for the entire trajectory of your personal brand, your company brand, depending on what you're representing, and the reputation you now have in the marketplace, right? And so you're right, you get it right, your fee goes up. But here's what happens to most people, Rory: they crash against the wall and never get known by anyone. And they're scrambling and hustling for scraps from people who figured it out, you know? And so you're talking about the right way. It just exists on multiple levels.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting is it's like you're playing the big game of your reputation always.
Yep.
But even, you have some number of relationships where you're already through the wall. There's some number of people who trust you. There's other people who've never heard of you. And it's kind of like you're at the beginning of that model, kind of like working your way in the door. Almost like you could think of content in this way of like somebody is paying you whatever, $20,000 a month for a retainer because you're on the other side of the wall. Someone else is just reading your very first tweet for the first time, and it's 144 characters, and they go, ooh, I like that tweet. Let me go read their blog post. And now they read a blog post, and then they go, oh, let me subscribe to their newsletter. Let me show up for their 1-hour webinar, and then kind of. So it's like each individual person. So here is the thing that everybody struggles with. How do I find my thing? Like, the whole concept, which is so powerful and brilliant, is be known for one thing. You've described it here as being tight, like be extremely tight in your offer. How do you know which thing to do? Like, if you can talk about leadership and you can talk about sales, like, what do you think? How do you know?
This is going to rub some people the wrong way, mate, but you and I have spent our lives surrounded by people who want to make up the answer to that question, right? As opposed to the answer should be pretty clear. What are you actually world-class at? What are you an expert in where you can bring some unique contribution that other people can't bring? Where are you capable of creating the most value for another human being? That's where I would start that conversation. Don't start that conversation with, well, what do other people want? And then let me see if I can pretend to be an expert in that space. Or, you can do that, but it's going to be a long journey as you start to build capability, right? It'd be like you reading a survey right now that said, wow, the number one thing on Fortune 500 CEO's mind is alignment of their executive team to accelerate transformation. And you'd be like, right, I'm going to go sell that. Well, okay.
I think speakers do that all the time.
All the time. But you know what? Then they go mono a mono with me or Pete Feuder or McKinsey, and they get their lunch eaten. In fact, they don't even get it part of the conversation because they don't have real expertise in that space, right? And so I would start from a place of authenticity, really, like a place of genuine credibility. I have this unique thing, right? So for me, if I go back to my example I shared, for me, it was I knew young people. I had 300,000 kids on a database. I was able to survey them about their values, what they cared about, the careers they were interested in, why they weren't interested in others, what they thought of alternative career paths and not going to college. So when I write a book on the millennials, which was basically the first book in the world from a business perspective on the topic, it comes from a place of deep research and deep credibility. Now, it just so happened that the market really needed the insight as well. And so you do want to give that consideration, right? Which is, all right, what are my authentic, true expertise and skill sets? And then where do they meet a need in the market that's not being satisfied or not being satisfied in the way I think I can meet that need? And you find the overlap between those two things, and now you got magic, right? Better still find the overlap between those two things and what you really love to do. And now you're living the dream life. I can't remember, what's the name of that Japanese model? They got the fourth circle, I can't remember. There's like ancient models for understanding what we're talking about right now.
Ikigai.
Ikigai, yeah.
I think it's called, I think it's Ikigai or something like that.
Yeah. In other words, we didn't make this up, but funny that we've stumbled on something that's, been in philosophy for thousands of years.
So to that question, how did you come up with this model? Like, and what you call it is just the making it, is it the making it happen master model? Is that, I mean, that's how you refer to it.
I don't know what I call it. I'd have to go back to the book, or that was a few years ago, mate. Do you know the last time I spoke about this model was the speech you went to in 2009?
That's so funny. What year was it? What year was that?
Oh, it's got to be 09, 2010, something like that.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Yeah, I mean, it was a long time ago, and that's why I never knew you had a book. Like I never heard you talk about it ever again. I never heard it anywhere else again.
Well,
but it was,
what?
So
There's
powerful.
a lesson. There's a lesson in that though, right? So all my market momentum is with corporations, right? I wrote this book because people were banging my door down on a daily basis going, how did you get breakthrough? What, teach me how to do what you did. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to write it in a book. This was my recipe. And so as for how I came up with it, I'm sure the origin of it is not entirely original. Like it doesn't seem to me like a groundbreaking idea to teach people to get tight and focused in what they take to market. So so not only is it easy to grab attention, but you can be better at it, right? I'm in the middle of a strategy project right now, and I'm telling you, the business partners are so far they are on either sides of the spectrum, right? Like wanting to do everything for everyone for the rest of humanity. And it's like, good luck. Like that's not going to work. So the underlying disciplines of this, of making it happen, are really sound in corporate strategy as well as personal brand strategy. And so there's a lesson in the fact that I don't talk about it. And that's not my space. That's not where I play. And you know what? I bet you, or if you and I sat down and had a beer, we could find 20 other things that you could be world-class at on top of what you do now and are already world-class at. You could totally build you could totally build businesses in all these other areas. The problem is you end up spreading not just your time and energy so thin, but all of a sudden you confuse the market. Like they don't know what your reputation is for. And so you don't want to go too wide. Now, the beautiful thing is once you have a reputation and you have critical mass, you can go much wider than you started that process with, but not so wide that all of a sudden people don't know what you stand for or what you do. And so I made a really deliberate decision to not build my brand and reputation around making it happen, despite it being a pretty successful book, by the way. Actually, in some countries, not in all. In a couple of countries, not in most, is probably more accurate. Because I wasn't going to speak on it. I didn't want to do public seminars. I didn't want to be selling to individuals. I like single buyers that write really big checks. That's just my preference. I don't want to be known by that many people. There's only about 1,000 people in the world that I actually need to know who I am, not 100,000 or a million, And so it was just not, it was almost an anomaly in my body of work, actually.
Yeah. I mean, you describe it as discipline. I mean, that was, my first book, Take the Stairs, was really about discipline in general. And one of the things that we said in the Take the Stairs book was if you have diluted focus, you get diluted results. We never thought we would shift into personal branding. It was only when we exited our company a few years ago. And then it was like, okay, well, crap, we can't do sales anymore. We've done sales our whole life. What are we going to do? Like, oh, I guess we'll do personal branding. We know something about that. And then it was like this idea is the same discipline is of going, I'm going to narrow my message. And what I think is really true, and this is probably why you and I haven't touched paths, is because we serve different markets. Like you're saying you want one person who writes really big checks. We literally think about it the opposite. We literally go, we want a whole bunch of people who can have a small monthly payment, right?
Yeah.
Like it's totally different. But what I hear in that is that narrowing the market of who you serve is also a part of this, in addition to narrowing how you serve them or what you do for them.
Yeah, let's break it down, right? I think the real key to narrow first is clearly articulating the value to whomever and whatever market you want to serve, right? Like to not be so all over the place with that people don't really get it. You know, like, Rory, I don't really understand what you mean by personal branding. What is that actually going to do for me? Like, you don't want that response to your positioning or to your content or to the way people refer you. You want people to refer you like, I'm going to put you in touch with my buddy Rory, has a monthly membership. And if you want to accelerate the time to profitability and high revenue on the back of your personal brand and reputation, he's the guy to talk to. That's what you want me to say.
We're going to edit that clip and put it on the website.
Make that a testimonial.
Yeah, a testimonial.
But literally, it goes all the way down to referral. Like how I set you up determines how successful your conversion would be, right? Mm-hmm. What you don't want me to say is, hey, let me introduce my buddy to Rory. I don't know if he can help you, but I don't know, you guys sort of sound like you want the same thing. Let me make the introduction. That's the worst introduction in history, right? Like now, once you're clear on the value, then you can start asking yourself the question, well, who do I want to serve, right? In my case, it is senior executives, and it's only really senior executives, right? I get speaking offers all the time to do all hands events. And most of the time I'm like, you know what? I'm probably not your guy. You need someone who's way more got way more appeal and charisma and, you know, is better at that audience. And I'll refer them to one or three or four people that I know and trust, you know? And so I am narrow on the audience. And then the third question is, and now, which you raised, how do I want to serve them? I don't do one-on-one coaching for executives. It doesn't create enough change, in my opinion, right? Not only that, there's thousands of executive coaches, and so they're driving the price down. I want to do something way more difficult, which is to drive alignment at a team level. Much harder to do than get an executive to realize they're showing up like a, you know,
not awesome person.
Am I allowed to swear on your podcast? You know,
I mean, you can, yeah.
And so there's three layers of the clarification process. One is, what is the value I want to bring? Two, who do I want to bring it to? And then three, what's the modality? What's the business model that I want with that? And then the fourth is probably, what is the modality, right? So what's the value? Who do I want to serve? What's the business model? And then what's the modality? Now, the business model is the question people almost never ask, right? But you just raised it. You said, you know what? I really want a large number of people writing a really reasonably priced check for the amount of value they get, coming together that forms a community that I'm a part of, not just leading, where it's self-perpetuating, subscription model. I don't have to start from zero every 3 months. Like, that's a beautiful business model.
Yeah, it's interesting. When we started Brand Builders Group, we actually said, and this as of right now, we're 3 years in, we want 1,000 messengers. We want 1,000 people who will invest $1,000 a month, which would be about, it's $1 million a month. And that's a business where we've operated a business of that size before. And we just like, not only did we narrow who we wanted to serve, we know exactly how many of them we want, right? We only want 1,000 of these people. And yeah, the business model is like, we realize one-on-one coaching is where we can really differentiate. And it's interesting to just, even as you talk, to go like, man, if a senior executive called me and was like, hey, Rory, I want you to be my coach, I would literally tell them, I'm not your guy. Like that. Yeah. If you want to write your book, I'm your freaking guy. Like, you want to turn your career into a speaker, you want to build your following, whatever. I'm like, yeah, but if they're like, hey, I want you to just talk to me one-on-one about how to structure my company, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not your guy.
Yeah. And knowing that's great. By the way, the great irony of this is, as you know, I teamed up with Josh Linkner, Seth Madison, Ryan Estes, and we're now basically building a model, not dissimilar to the brand builders model, but with a more targeted audience, specifically people that want to speak, and we have all the distribution relationships. We know all the buyers, we know what they care about. We can take someone from a 10-year journey and make it 2 years, and it's a different model. Now, it's not a business that I'm not doing all the one-on-one coaching or whatever. I still consult to executives and do that work, And so in some ways, I'm going to be calling you in a few months and go, tell me exactly how you did that thing at Brand Builders, right? Because I'm used to large checks.
Yeah.
Right. Single buyer, complex buying process, sometimes a long buying process, but one large check. And, literally we used to have this goal, which was, all right, get your first $1,000 check, get your first $10,000 check, get your first $1 million check, get your first $10 million check. And the largest single contract I ever signed was about 57 million. And I was like, all right, that's not bad for one client,
Wow.
That's a good deal. Now that was the delivery of that work was over a series of 3 to 4 years, right?
Sure.
Like it wasn't all in one 3-month period, but it feels pretty good to get a check that big, or to get a commitment that big, because it doesn't quite work like that. You get the check over time. But the point I'm getting at is that's a totally different business. For me, it was maximizing the size of the check. For you, it was maximizing the number of people who'd write the check. Totally different path.
Yep.
But think about this, Roy, and this is, I think, is the takeout for your listeners, right? The clearer you are on these answers, the value you bring, who you bring it to, the business model, which is the bit we're talking about now, and the modality, things like coaching, podcast, that's a modality in my mind, right?
Yep, totally.
The clearer you are on those top 3 things, and the fourth as well, but particularly the top 3, the easier decision-making gets. Like, it's not hard to say, no, that's not my client. Or, you sit and you listen to this podcast and you're like, man, Pete had those 3 great ideas. They might be dumb ideas for you because they don't match the value you want to bring. They don't match the business model you're building. They don't match the audience you want to serve. Like, in my experience, there's no such thing as a good idea and a bad idea in this kind of learning space. There are aligned ideas and misaligned ideas. And that's how I assess them. Is this a aligned idea for what I'm trying to create? I think one of the most beautiful things about the way you serve the market, mate, is that you help people get clear. And the clearer they get, the easier it will be to make decisions. And by the way, the easier it will be to get through the metaphorical wall, right?
Because if you're all over them, you mean Sheahan's wall?
Well, no, I still can't do it in the third person, but yeah.
Okay. So, all right. So honest, open thing here. I really want your wisdom on this. So in our former life, we did one-on-one sales coaching. It was super clear, right? We coach salespeople, B2C salespeople, real estate, financial advisors, how to sell. We scaled that. It was straightforward. Then Brand Builders Group starts. We do personal brand strategy. So we do, we coach experts, primarily speakers, authors, coaches, consultants, and then entrepreneurs, like professional services still, how to build their personal brand. Brand Builders Group, super clear, growing. What I personally am struggling with at this one thing I'm struggling with at this precise moment is we have the Rory Vaden who built his career on self-discipline, overcoming procrastination, and that was take the stairs. And then my TED Talk, How to Multiply Time, which got a couple million views. That was how I built my career as a speaker. Then we built a company on sales coaching. And now we have Brand Builders Group doing personal brand strategy. And I'm struggling a little bit with how to tell the whole story, not with what Brand Builders Group does. That's straight and narrow. But what does Rory Vaden do? And I get calls for speeches, right? Not for, hey, can you come talk on something random? But it's more like, I saw your TED Talk. Will you come speak on this? But it's to an audience that's not personal brands, which is what our core business is focused on now. And so some of that, I'm trying to be like, where does my personal brand sit at this point? And where am I at on Sheahan's wall? Because to the point you were talking about earlier about how it works on a granular level, like for an individual relationship, and then also like at an industry or reputation level, we've also started to describe it as really it's a series of walls at a high level. So you dominate your local market, then your regional market, national, whatever. And so I'm trying to wrestle a little bit with like, what is the story of RoryVaden.com at this point in my life? Should I just go, all I care about is personal branding, ignore everything that I've done, just let it go? Or is there some way that it all sits together? And I'm genuinely interested in free consulting.
Are we still on the podcast, or did you just get 30 grand worth of coaching for nothing? I have two very strong opinions. Firstly, I agree that I don't think of it as multiple walls. I think of it that the wall keeps moving, right? Like you're always looking to get to the next level, the next space. And in some ways, you're the flavor of the month at one point, and then people have had you, they know you, they've moved on to the next flavor, and you have to find a new way to get back on their mental menu, right? Here's my first piece of advice. Don't try and include every part of everything you've done in your story. People don't care, okay? Like I own a SaaS company called Educator Impact. It's suicide prevention and well-being tracking for kids in schools. It also does 360-degree evaluation of teachers. It's an incredibly successful and impactful business. And you've never heard me talk about that once. And I'm sure in your research, it didn't come up. I don't need it to be part of my story. It just confuses the buyer. I don't need to confuse the buyer, right? Like at our peak, we were doing 40,000 workshops a year before. In fact, this is in the company I sold to Ernst & Young for 1.2 million people around the world. And it never once was in my bio because it was about community investment strategy and helping to elevate the reputations of companies in the market. But that's not what Peter Sheahan was spending his personal time on. I just happen to own that company because long story, but it came out of a client delivery I had. I knew how to solve the problem. I built a company around that. I don't need to confuse my current brand positioning with all of that material. Does that make sense?
That's great.
It's like, so the answer to the question, Rory, the easiest answer to the question is, what do you want to be talking about, right? Like, where do you want to spend your time? What's your highest order contribution? What's the biggest impact you have? And then which bits of your story lend credibility to that? You're the only one who will be worried about how it all stitches together. Everyone else is just, hey, I've got a problem. I saw your TED talk and I've got 35 grand, 40 grand will you come and do a speech? Like, don't overcomplicate it. My advice to you, however, is the more aligned RoryVaden.com is to brand builders, the less spread your personal energy will be, right? And so, here's the biggest mistake speakers make in terms of building a company, right? They look at their speaking fee. Let's use easy numbers. Let's say your speaking fee is 15 grand, right? They tell themselves the story, they get paid $15,000 a day or $15,000 an hour, but they don't, because they only get 50 speeches a year or 100 if they're lucky. And really they're working like as a low price lawyer at about $500 an hour. You're not anywhere near as valuable as you think you are, right? It's just that your modality is a short burst for a high fee and you don't get a lot of deliveries, right? And so I would look back and go, where is the most value going to get created? Is it in Rory Vaden doing speeches, or is it in Rory Vaden building the message of brand builders and increasing the subscription model? Because I can tell you now, the enterprise value of brand builders is going to be substantially higher than the enterprise value of RoryVaden.com. And here's the reason that matters. One, once it gets critical mass, it starts building itself, and it's less about your personal exertion. Two, if you ever sold it, not that that's what you're saying you want to do, you only pay capital gains on that rather than personal income tax. So immediately you're 25% better off. And when someone buys it, they'll give you a multiple on your discounted future cash flow, which means they might buy 13 years of profit off the table at half the tax rate that you pay, right? Like, now I'm not saying that's what you should do, but there is a value decision to be made. And so I would start with, what do you want to talk about? I would then put it through the filter of, is this going to support what I'm really trying to build here? And what's more important to me? And then I would say your answer shakes out of that. And the closer and more aligned those two things are, the more leverage you're going to get.
Yeah. Well, and basically what's happened is for 3.5 years, I have just ignored Rory Vaden's personal brand because it's been all in on Brand Builders Group, because of exactly what you said, going, at some point we will get this. AJ, my wife, she's our CEO, and we've been business partners since 2006. We already know that at some point it will gain enough critical mass, it will start to grow. And now we're starting to kind of turn that towards that direction. Yeah. And so now this is coming up again. And to what you're saying is going, gosh, the closer that my personal brand is, Anyways, that's awesome. I think it's super powerful for me even to just hear, don't feel obligated like you have to make sense of everything you've ever done and share it all and make sense of it in your story. Like your customer only cares about their problem. You only need to share whatever parts of your story are relevant to solving their problem.
Yeah. The only people, Rory, who woke up this morning thinking about you, AJ, your wife, your 2 kids, yourself, and the people who are trying to steal your business. That's it. Everyone else woke up with their own problem, and you either have positioned your value to solve that problem or you don't. You either position in a way that appeals to that individual buyer or you didn't. You either position the business model to serve that person in a way that they actually, are willing to prescribe to and write checks for, and you're either doing it in a modality that suits them or it doesn't. Like, it's really that simple, and that hard at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, this is so awesome. So the book, y'all, Making It Happen, Turning Good Ideas into Great Results, Sheahan's Wall, named by us, created by Peter Sheahan. But a lot more detail in it. And I've learned a lot today, and I would say very much there's things that have come out of this conversation that were not a part of how I thought about it, and it really is cool, man. So where should people go if they want to connect with you, Peter? Like, what would you have people, knowing that you did this basically as a helpful favor and a buddy to like talk about something you haven't talked about since 2009.
But live every day, by the way. But live every day.
Live every day. Yeah. How do you want people to think about you? Where should they find you? What should they refer for you, etc.?
Yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn. That's probably the safest place to stay in touch. You can follow me on Instagram. I've posted about once every 3 years. And so, maybe into 2023, you'll see a post from me. And this is we should actually get into this at some point.
Again, different audiences though. Like I don't hang out on LinkedIn very much.
Neither does
I hang out on Instagram.
But neither does the CEO of Pepsi. He's not on Instagram looking for corporate consultants and, someone to facilitate his executive offsite. Like, it's different audiences drive different decisions. I would go after LinkedIn. Is a great way to stay in touch. I would get on 3ringcircus.com and maybe join the mailing list there, and you'll learn more about the work we're doing in speaker development and
yeah. We had one of your business partners, Josh Linkner. We had him on this show, another world-class speaker, one of the very, very best. We interviewed him. You guys are business partners in 3 Ring Circus. So
yeah, Josh is a badass. I mean, that guy is a production machine. Like, that guy can market like you would not believe. And so that's where I'd go. I think there's a place on my website, petersheahan.com, to sign up. We don't communicate to that list a lot, but when we do, but if you're on it, when we have something interesting, we'll let you know.
Yeah. Well, man, I love this. And I guess I just want to say, like, thank you while I have you. Sometimes people kind of make the comment like, oh, you can't change a life with a 45-minute keynote. And I would say, I used to think that, and I think of it less because of things like you. I haven't talked to you in 10 years, and that one thing that you put up at that one moment hit me in the right way at the right time, stuck with me, changed my career, and now we're trying to pass along your legacy to people and go like, look at the power of this thing, all from one random talk that you did. Yeah. 10 years ago. You don't even make money. You don't even talk to those groups anymore. And it's made a huge impact, man. Really, really powerful. And it's been not just for me, I mean, definitely for me, but for a lot of the people that we talk to. And I'm glad they're texting you going like, dude, what is Sheahan's Wall? Because it's so impactful.
I was the one asking them what's Sheahan's Wall. Look, mate, firstly, you're welcome. I appreciate you saying thanks. Anyone that underestimates the power of a single presentation to change a life is outside of their mind. 45 minutes with Jim Rohn transformed my life. And I built a company that worked with millions of kids, on important life skills. I built a corporate consulting company that transforms, we brought Microsoft and Apple during their like turnarounds. Like that all came from that one day in the Horden Pavilion in Sydney with Jim Rohn on a platform, right? And, you know, you have other versions of that, I'm sure, in your life where something has changed the way you saw the world. And so I'm a deep believer in the power of what I call that a catalytic experience. And I feel honored, flattered, and I take it very seriously, the responsibility we get to do that on a daily basis.
Wow. Well, Sheahan's Wall, everybody, from the source, Peter Sheahan. Go grab the book, Making It Happen. Let's see if we can sell some more books for him. You know, read about this directly from the source. Brother, we wish you the best. It's an honor to be a colleague, to be a mentee, a student of yours, and really appreciate you carving some time out. And thanks for the free consulting. You're welcome to do that anytime you want.
Thanks, brother. Take care.
See ya.